the kinds of opportunities that exist when we get behind young women and support them to lead with the passion and conviction they have. Before we kick off this event, I just wanted to let you know that we are indeed taping and that we ask you to have grace with us as we navigate technology in new ways. We're getting the hang of it, but it is indeed a new environment for us. So thank you for your patience. Thank you for joining us. And now I'm very pleased to turn it over to Sydney Drake. Sydney is our Southeast Program Manager who's going to facilitate this conversation with folks that are in local offices across the country. And I can't think of a better person to host this and facilitate this conversation than Sid herself. Sid actually just declared a couple of weeks ago that she is running to become school board trustee for Carlton Farmers Branch Independent School District in Texas. So what a better person to facilitate. Sydney, I'm going to turn it over to you and you can go ahead and introduce your speakers. And please, if you have not done so already, speakers, please take yourself off of mute and hopefully we'll get your cameras.
Okay, thank you so much, Amy. I really appreciate that. And I don't know about you guys, but I'm so happy to be here and I'm so excited for this really incredibly timely discussion for me to moderate, as Amy mentioned, given that I am a candidate. My name is on that November ballot, and I'm looking forward to getting nuggets of information that I know is going to come from this discussion that's going to help me along the way as I campaign for my race as well. So without further ado, let me go ahead and introduce our panelists today. First,
Sydney, before you get started, I'm going to turn myself off as well, and I think that's going to help us turn Carlina on. So 1 second.
Okay, perfect.
Maybe she was
Hi. Hi, thank you. Well, first we have Carlina Rivera. Carlina represents the 2nd Council District. Since taking office in 2017, she has fought for the affordability and livability of New York City by championing issues around equitable healthcare, affordable housing, small business survival, transportation, and quality of life issues. In addition, on tackling these tough legislative issues, she has taken a stand for gender equity as a former co-chair of the Women's Caucus by sponsoring legislation on sexual harassment and the gender wage gap. Carolina was inspired to run for office when the Lower East Side was devastated by Hurricane Sandy back in 2012. And she organized volunteers to provide food, water, and emergency services to the communities abandoned by the federal government. She has since secured millions of dollars for her district to improve services, programs, schools, and cultural institutions. So thank you so much for being here today, Carlina. Next, we have Jocelyn Yao. Jocelyn currently serves as the mayor pro tem for the city of Eastvale, California, and she's an Ignite alum who currently oversees our national advocacy strategy. She became involved in advocacy and Ignite while attending Norco College. She continued that work by representing her peers at large as student body president. With home close to her heart, she transferred to the University of California, Berkeley, where she obtained her bachelor's degree. She is a new mom and is currently pursuing her master's degree in government at Harvard Extension. And last but certainly not least, we have Samantha Perlman. She currently serves as a counselor at large for the Marlborough City Council. A proud graduate of Emory University, Sam currently works at a nonprofit dedicated to evidence-based policy and is chair of her city's cultural council. Her background is in state and federal legislative policy work, community organizing, and youth civic education, where she helped secure passage of the 2018 Massachusetts Civic Education Law. Sam is also an Ignite alum and a graduate of Emerge, Massachusetts. What a wonderful wonderful list of panelists that we have here. Thank you so much for being here. I'm really excited for this conversation, and I just want to jump right into it. So each of you ran for office in your 20s or your early 30s, and you won. Tell us briefly about an experience and how you show up with the perspective as a young woman, and in some of your cases, how you show up as the only woman of color in leadership. Jump right in. Anyone take it?
Well, I can share a little bit. So I am the only woman serving on my city council and the first woman of color. It certainly comes with its own challenges, and I'm sure the other two speakers can speak about this as well. It's very challenging because first, as a young woman, when I ran, a lot of people did not take me seriously. Even my now colleagues, back then they were those council members, like nobody thought I was gonna win. But what I did was that I knocked on every single door. It doesn't matter what race, gender, age, party preference. I knocked on every single door. I did phone banking. I also text banking. So that's something that's a lot of campaigns don't necessarily do, is that I was texting young voters. I sent them messages. I was actually communicating with them through that way. And so I won the election with 70% of the vote, and which caught everyone by surprise. But even then, I thought I had earned my spot. But apparently my colleagues did not think so. At our very first meeting, everyone was assigned with certain committee assignments, with regional committee assignments. I was not given any assignment. And luckily for me, because it was also my swearing-in committee, so I had a lot of my fellow sisters, a lot of other city council women, local electeds, mostly women, females. They all showed up at that meeting, and we caused a scene. I was like, no, I got elected. I'm here just as deserving as every single one of you up here. So I need to be in at least at the very minimum 1 or 2 committees. And they were like, yeah, like give Jocelyn the committee. And so I did. I had to fight for my committee assignments. I was not given, like, even though I rightfully won my election again with 70% of the vote. So that experience was quite a memorable one. But not only that, I had to fight for my own committee assignment, but also I'm so grateful for my sisters, for my friends who showed up for me. That was a prime example of how women should be supporting each other, and that really I stand on the shoulders of those who came before me in other cities, because we never had one in my city, but I stand on the shoulders of those who came before me in other cities, and they were very supportive. And I have, now that I'm an elected myself, it is my goal to really mentor other young women and have them run for office as well.
Great. Thank you.
I was just gonna add that, that's first it took us a minute to decide who was gonna go first, right? Because we're all trying to lift each other up and allowing that person to get a word in so we can really amplify what they're saying. And I think that's a big difference in leadership between men and women. So I'll just start there. And I just want to thank Ignite for having us, for having me here. And I'm so honored to be in the company of such inspiring women. I mean, this is the question that starts off a conversation about political power and really gets people thinking whether or not they should, engage in political or even civic leadership. And a lot of, I think, women don't even know that they're already civic leaders. And it's just making sure that we're cultivating those relationships. And when you talk about mentorship, it's difficult because there are so few of us and we are wearing so many hats at one time that to really have people be there for you and stand up for you, it's not as common as people would think. And it's very difficult for us. I would say that, running in my race, I was the youngest person running in my race. I remain the youngest woman in the city council. There are 51 members of the New York City Council. I am one of only 12 women. So some people might feel like, oh, in my town or in my, village, this is going to be really difficult for me. I mean, even in a city as progressive as New York, we're still struggling for parity and representation. And so, I'm the daughter of a Puerto Rican single mom, and I was raised in subsidized housing. Those aren't really stories that get you into political office, but they're becoming more common. And I certainly have a different background compared to other elected officials. So, sometimes you have that feeling of looking at political leadership, not seeing people that look like you. How I entered kind of this industry is I started on my community board. There weren't really people my age or that looked like me, really no Latinos, really no young people. So I even hesitated in joining that. And so, to bring your perspective, I think that we operate from a very, very different place. It's certainly courageous. It's certainly compassionate. And I can tell you that, being the former chair of the Women's Caucus, and even as I legislate, when we reviewed the legislation, it's very, very interesting because we found that while men introduce bills at a higher rate than women, we found that women actually pass more legislation than our male counterparts. And we did that kind of like internal study within the city council and with the legislative division. So just to, show people that you might not necessarily be throwing out ideas every single minute because we're thoughtful. We really, really try to think about people's, empathy and all the things that I think make us different. And so, now as I can tell you in my role in leadership, things that I've done is, making sure that we're taking care of historically marginalized communities, caretakers, predominantly women, frontline staff, especially in the healthcare sector. And what we saw with COVID, my role as a chair of hospitals became really, really important. I helped secure unprecedented funding nationally. It was $250,000 to provide abortion access to women not covered by insurance or Medicaid. And also just really trying to push an inclusive agenda that includes non-binary and trans individuals. So, people, they doubt you. They, as a woman and as a woman of color, they will try to discredit you at every single opportunity. But hearing those last numbers of how much you won, and then my numbers of winning 61% in a 6-way primary, people can't take away how hard we work.
Exactly. Thank you both for that.
Wait, I'm like so appreciative. I just want to say, Jocelyn and Carlina, like it's so wonderful to share this space with you all. And thank you so much to Ignite for providing this opportunity. And I resonate with so much that's been said because I think running as a young woman, you're already at an advantage and a disadvantage where people don't know your superpower, right? They don't know what you're capable of. They underestimate you. And I just got elected this past November. So actually today I'm from Massachusetts. So we have a primary in Massachusetts today. And people were like, remember when you were on the ballot? I was like, flashbacks. But it was one of the best experiences I think I've ever had in my whole life. And I think, there's so many pieces to it that I think is important for young women to know about and others who are invested in this work is, the decision to run, I feel like is the biggest choice. You're so vulnerable when you do decide. I ended up running in my hometown where I grew up. So I went away for university. When I came back, I decided I was going to run at 23 and then ended up getting elected at 24. And I just remember everyone saying like, you have the name recognition to run, citywide. And like, maybe you should start at a lower level or, I remember I was pretty far into the early campaign process, fortunate to have wonderful training through Ignite early on, a year before I decided to run and then able to do Emerge. And people were like, do you even have a treasurer? You fundraise and like kind of asking questions as I wasn't prepared to run and kind of insinuating that they knew more than I did. And I'd be like, oh yeah, actually we've already raised, X amount of money, like kind of letting them know that I was in it for the long game and was really prepared. And I think that as I was running, a lot of people initially didn't think I was the candidate. I was fortunate to, speak at a young woman run in New York, and I shared this story. But one door I knocked on, a gentleman, he asked if I was the candidate's wife, and even though I told him that I was the candidate, he literally said, "Oh, so you're the candidate's wife?" And I said, "No, I am the candidate." So I think even just by existing and running for office, we are changing the narrative and the mental picture of what leadership looks like in our communities, and that's so powerful. And so things like that when I was like really, frustrated with, all of the doors, and I was, working a full-time job at the same time. I was like, you know what, moments like that are why we need to run, because people need to know that young women are really powerful and their voices are needed. And so I did tons of door knocking. So just like Jocelyn, pounding the pavement. So, everyone running during COVID, I can only imagine the phone banking that needs to happen, but there was just so many doors. And I think what was so powerful is people really resonated with me. Like I had this commitment to service. So similar to Carlina, I was able to join a city board early on. And even then people were like, are you really, even representing, like, what are you doing here? Like, are you lost? Even, why do you want to join this board? Our council has 11 people. When I was running, there was only one woman on the council, and now there are 3. And I'm the youngest woman ever elected when I was elected at 24, and was in a 7-way race for one of the 4 at-large seats against 4 incumbents and 2 other challengers. Was able to top the ticket with the most votes of anyone, and we increased voter turnout as well in that election. And that was because of that commitment, right? Actually asking people for their vote and not just assuming that you had it. And I think that was something that was really important. And as Jocelyn mentioned as well, right? Like trying to get even young people out to vote, right? People were like, what does city council even do? And I grew up in the community my whole life, and I didn't know what the city council did. And it was only through this process of, college and then being working in the civic education, in a nonprofit sector, I was like, wow, there's such power in local government. And I think that it's wonderful when our, bodies of government actually represent the communities, and that's so important. Otherwise, the policies that get made and even just the relationship the community has to their elected officials is so different. But I feel like even now, people are, they just message me so casually, been like asking questions that they wouldn't ask someone typically. They're like, simple things. And I feel like that's super powerful. So I'll stop there, but it's just a really great experience. So highly encourage if anybody is thinking about it. We're always here to chat.
And I will say, like, all 3 of you hit on hit on things that I have already experienced. Like, yes, I will be only the second African American to be on the school board when I do win. Be one of the youngest. I had someone ask me if I was the babysitter of a candidate. I'm like, no, I'm a candidate. Like, what are you talking about? And I've also had those feelings of like imposter syndrome, asking to be on committees, and I'm just like, why am I qualified for this? It's like, no, Sydney, you are qualified for this. So thank you so much for your perspectives, because I feel like as women, as young women, women of color, we have all these barriers that we face and things that we have to personally hit before we even put our names in the ballot. And Carlina, to your point, thank you so much for bringing up all your work you've done for COVID. That was actually my next question for you, because this is what an incredible moment in time. COVID, national protests, and economic recession. Is there anything specifically that you want to add to address about this moment and being a local policymaker?
Sure. I mean, that's a great question. And I just want to the both of you, like, and to you running, like what we have to go through and the questions that no one would ever ask a man, no matter what age or what they look like. And yeah, we do encourage everyone to run. It's a lot, but I just want you to know that when you get in there, you're going to be able to do really, really great things. Like as both, a citizen and a policymaker, it can get very, very easy to feel overwhelmed. And then especially in this moment right now, the weight of the issues that our country and that our communities face. I mean, however, I also see this moment as an opportunity, right, to forge progress, to advocate for those who are often left behind in policy. And I think we can see that a lot in terms of police accountability and, of course, the inequities in our healthcare system. But, during the crisis, what I've done is whether it's knocking on doors to deliver meals to residents that are facing food insecurity, even in a city as wealthy as New York, or fighting to pass legislation in the council. There are many ways that myself and my staff have been trying to meet this moment to serve our community. And we all know we're nothing without our teams, whether they're campaign or whether they're staff. In terms of policy, probably since the pandemic, I've proposed. So the way that it goes in the city council is you propose something and then it gets drafted and you eventually introduce it. About 100 pieces of legislation just around all types of issues, spanning from PPE allocation, small business relief, police oversight, and I'm the chair of the council's committee on hospitals. So I've been trying to focus on those health inequalities that we knew existed, that were just exacerbated by COVID-19. That's just fighting the systemic barriers that people of color face in accessing healthcare. And of course, pushing for transparency in our healthcare system. And, you know, the maternal mortality crisis that we saw, I mean, it was still taking place during the pandemic, and then people not being able to have familial support in that room with them while they were giving birth, while Black and brown women are already at risk. That was something that we certainly tried to address, you know, in a very, very urgent way. I mean, there's also frustrating obstacles. There's a lot of ego in this. You know, there's limitations with the political process and even what I could do on the municipal level. Earlier this year, I voted actually against the city budget that failed to make meaningful cuts to the NYPD, to that budget which we should have prioritized funds for services for marginalized communities. And I just feel like we failed to hit that mark, especially at a time. It's an unprecedented national movement. But my work doesn't stop within the halls of the city council. It's every day, right? It's a fight to address racial justice and equity, joining my constituents in the protests in the streets, and trying to elevate voices of other leaders in this fight against police brutality and racism, which is just really taking this national presence. So I co-sponsored legislation that banned the chokehold process on a national level, especially after a similar technique was used on one of my constituents, Donnie Wright, which it made the paper. That was a brutal arrest that took place on Avenue D, which started as, you know, a social distancing kind of infraction, and it just really, really escalated. And then in July, right in my district on 2nd Avenue, a young trans woman named Nikki Stone, she prefers to be called Stickers, was dragged into an unmarked vehicle by plainclothes NYPD officers at a protest in my district. So in coordination with other community advocates, we worked to bring attention to what essentially you could see on film was like an abduction, and push for Nikki's immediate release, which was achieved 1 day later with incredible community support. So, you know, just working on several pieces of legislation to regulate and increase oversight of the NYPD, especially the use of unmarked police vehicles. And that kind of exemplifies how a policymaker, you can use every avenue of action and influence to rise to the moment and support my community, the city, or wherever you're from as we really push through some challenging times.
Right. Wow. Thank you so much for that. And thank you for all that you're doing. And I wanna ask Sam and Jocelyn, like what Carlina just shared is happening during your first chapter as your youngest council members. What has your experience been, and how have you been able to elevate your voices and the lived experiences of young people?
Do you want me to go, Jocelyn?
You should go.
Go ahead, because I
Right.
went first.
Yeah. Carlina's right. We're always like waiting. I don't want to interrupt anybody, so I appreciate the opportunity to speak on this question as well. Yeah, I mean, think about this, right? You win in November. You're super pumped. First term, gonna learn everything, right? Get all those like relationships built. Pandemic hits, game changer, right? Like totally a game changer. And then, you know, a resurging civil rights movement. I mean, I think Carlina described it really well. I mean, so much challenge, but so much opportunity to reimagine the way that we do things. And I also think there's been such a focus on, you know, in the absence of certain levels of leadership, what can local and state officials do, right? There actually is more of, I think, an internal look at like, well, who is making those decisions, right, on my school board? Who is deciding what happens? Like if there's a mask mandate in my local level, if there isn't one at the state level, or who is making those decisions? So I think it's been a real relationship building opportunity, especially in terms of getting accurate information out there to the public. You know, I was fortunate to do a lot of like online events to try to educate people about what was happening at our state level. So we did like a state insights event with our state delegation, which was really wonderful. And in terms of even just like young people, we did like a how to get involved in your community event with young people. I've been meeting pretty regularly with some high school students in my community. We did a podcast. Like we're trying to find different ways to reach people. I think there's been an increased excitement around using social media as a tool, right? What is possible with online events. I mean, even that all of us are here and live in different places, right? There's just more of an appetite to connect with people across different areas and to learn from one another. But it's certainly been challenging. I think if there's anything I've learned as a new elected official really is that, you know, there are limitations to what the legislative branch of government can do in an emergency. There are certain things that just don't go through our branch or don't start there. And in many ways, even, you know, with certain things, the legislature responds. They don't necessarily initiate certain things. And that's been, I think, frustrating for me as someone who like wants to get the ball rolling, got a lot of enthusiasm, right? That's one of the good qualities, I think, of young women in office, right? We're just so eager to support the community. And I think there's just a lot of disparities that we're seeing, right? Like we had a higher COVID case rate, right? How is that serving our communities of color within the district as well? What are the access to, you know, to food look like? So I was helping and volunteering to deliver food to our seniors every week and being able to do that at our food pantry. You know, I was like trying to find masks and PPE to give out to the different organizations that are out there, because sometimes, you know, there were groups needing it, but they, you know, were only sharing it maybe with you because they had a relationship and they didn't know who to go to. And so that was a really great way, especially when the pandemic was at its height, because it's been still bad here in Massachusetts, but I know that we've been able to get through our, I think, our darkest hour, even though I imagine it's going to resurge again here in the state in pretty powerful ways. And I think a lot of it too is being able to listen. So, I mean, I was helping people file for employment, right? I was answering questions about how to get a vote by mail application. You know, people would call me just to chat. I mean, people were like, I mean, a lot of our seniors, right? They are so isolated. They weren't able to do anything. They couldn't even maybe go to the grocery store. And I would have people, I think, call me on a regular basis just to ask what I was doing and to hear about, you know, people wish me happy birthday in June. Like people wanted to build community in that powerful way. And so I think that if anything, people have turned inward and been more conscious of who are my neighbors? Am I looking out for the people in my community in ways that I do think over time we've moved away from, right? We've been more, you know, thinking global in a way and moving away from the people that live around us. And so it's been definitely very challenging, but I think a really powerful opportunity. You know, we had a lot of protests that happened here in Marlborough as well. And I remember as soon as people wanted to organize, I think I had like 6 people contact me being like, do you know if there's a protest happening? And I was like, y'all should talk. So like, even just connecting people to one another, right? Like everyone wanted to do things. And, you know, we were able to have some really powerful protests in a city where I don't think I grew up there, never seen a protest the way that we had it here, where, you know, it was, everyone in support of Black Lives Matter. We've had people marching, you know, able to bring signs, had speakers, people sharing their lived experiences and having the opportunity to tell people in positions of power what they were experiencing head on. And I think that might not have been the same if it wasn't this like culmination of all of these different factors coming together. And I'm just really excited because I've seen so many young people realize that, you know, there is change that you can make at the local level, and that is so crucial. And so I'm excited because I do think that even though this has been a unprecedented first term in office, I think there's been so much that I've been able to do with the community and really be that advocate. And I think that that's our role, right, is to amplify what the community members want, because I think the most important branch of government is that fourth branch of the people.
Yes,
Samantha,
I think that's so important.
That's amazing, and thank you both for sharing. And I'm actually really glad that we're doing this, because it's forcing me to really list out like what have I done, because I don't know about y'all, but because of this COVID-19, everything is moving at such a fast pace. And also I'm a new mom, I have a 3-month-old. So frankly, I forget what I did, what I've been doing. And so this makes me like, I'm just like, okay, what have I done in the past year or so? So I'll, you know, 2 parts to this question, how to elevate women and women of color. I'll talk a little bit about pre-COVID-19 and then also during COVID-19. But one of the very first things that I did after I got elected, so as an elected city council member, I get to appoint commissioners. And I made the effort of appointing all women. So all my commissioners are all women, and they're all the only women in the commission, unfortunately. But you know, I'm glad I had the platform to do so and to lift up more women. But Also, since COVID-19 happened, a lot have happened. But I'm very fortunate to live in a state where our governor actually recognizes signs, and that we go by signs. So, but luckily we haven't had, because of that, we haven't had to deal with a lot of the issues in the city. But what happened was that in the beginning, back in March, when all this first happened, was that school was the first thing to get shut down. Schools were the first to get shut down before companies or anything else. And so a lot of parents, unfortunately, were still working and women especially were working while carrying the burden of taking care of the kids. And that is especially true for women of color. And so what I did in our city, at our city hall, was that I opened up the city hall to offer childcare. Couldn't take in a whole lot of people because of limited space, but we were able to take in a few here and there, and just offering that to our city employees and for those who really needed that. So that was one of the very first things, that was the first thing that I suggested when I heard about this. And that also comes from, what Councilwoman Rivera mentioned, is that the empathy that we have as women, like, we think about everyone else. We don't just think about ourselves. And we think about the vulnerable population. We think about the moms, the seniors. And when we got funding, so we applied for funding, and we got funding from state and federal. And it was up to us, up to the city council, to decide how to allocate that funding in our city. And my colleagues' immediately first reaction was, well, let's invest them into small businesses, because small businesses are the backbone of our economy, which is absolutely true. Our city has been hit hard because we're losing all the sales tax. However, I said, why not take it a step further? And instead of directly investing into small businesses, why not give it to families? Why not give gift cards, like restaurant or some sort of gift cards, to families, to seniors, so that they can dine local? They can invest the money back into our city while actually feeding their families. And I don't know why, but that idea got shut down. Well, I knew it because I was the only one who proposed, who was in favor of that. But for me, that was such a common sense solution that would have taken care of everyone in our city, whether it be businesses and our families. But unfortunately, my colleagues don't think so. But I think that's the main difference between women and men, is that we think about everyone, we take care of everyone. And so, and that's just one of the examples. And even before COVID-19, the very first thing that I did once I got elected was actually to install shelters at bus stops. And after that, a few months later, I was able to get an additional bus route approved in our city. And that's something that my colleagues were like, why are you doing that? Nobody ever takes the bus. I personally, I was one of those people who took buses. I relied on buses, and I am somebody. And when I was taking buses, I recognized those people. Like, they were our local high school students. They're seniors. They're oftentimes people of color who rely on public transit. We are somebody. We're not just nobody. And so, that's some of the things that I've been doing to elevate women of color in our city ever since I got elected, before and post COVID-19.
Wow. Thank you so much, Jocelyn and Sam, for your answers. I think about why it's so important to have women to have a seat at the table, because there's no ego there. Like, we always want to bring up the people behind us and represent our communities and the different perspectives that we have as mothers, as African-American women of color, as the youngest, as the oldest. It really doesn't even matter. So thank you so much for that. And before we wrap it up, let's talk about the election season. It's here, it's coming. And it really feels like no one pays attention to young people, yet they could be the most powerful voting bloc. What do you think is going to be effective to get young people motivated to vote?
Jocelyn, I think you're muted.
Jocelyn, you're muted. Yeah.
Frankly, I don't blame them. I mean, like, it's even before I ran for office, like seeing my council and my region, no one looks like me. And it's hard to vote for someone who does not look like you, who does not represent your values. I for me, the best solution that I could think of is to run for office, join a program like Ignite, and be the, like, as cliche as it is, like, be the change you wish to see. Like, vote. It's hard to vote for people who don't look like you. Like, for me, before I got elected, my city council, nobody looked like me. Nobody had share any of the values that I hold. And so it's hard to motivate people to vote when you don't have that. So definitely, like, run for office. If you don't have a reason, like, if you cannot find a reason to vote for those who are currently, running, then run for office.
Yeah, I can jump in too, because this is definitely something I think about a lot. I mean, right, having people vote in a presidential election, I mean, imagine having people vote in a local election. So that's like a whole other issue. But I think getting young people to vote, I mean, I think it connects to like policy issues. Like, what are the things that people care about? And sometimes because of the, like, disinvestment in civic education for so long, people don't really see that connection between I care about housing, or I care about immigration, or I care about the environment. And how does that connect to who do we elect, right? So the power of our vote, even being from Massachusetts, right? People say, my vote doesn't matter, right? It's just, it's already decided. And that's not true, right? We have a primary here today. People's votes really do count. So I think whenever I talk to people and they're like, I don't want to vote, I say, like, well, what do you care about? Like, what are the things that you care about? And then we have a conversation about that. And then we ask, like, what would make that situation better, right? Is there a lack of funding, right? Does there need to be different viewpoints at the table? Is the person in leadership not really representing you? And there's a conversation, and people somehow, right, are then able to make the connection to voting. And I think that we live in a world where we think voting is the only form of civic engagement, right? And it's not, right? There's so much that happens before you vote. There's so much that happens after you vote, right? Joining community boards and commissions. Are you involved in any organizations? Are you doing petitions? Are you protesting? Are you, writing op-eds and communicating with the press and sharing your viewpoints? Like, there are so many ways to connect with politics as a whole, and voting is, the most, I guess, the best metric that you can determine people's political engagement, but not the only one. And I think also, we've seen in my day job, I do a lot of work on college student voting. And even if we compare the 2014 midterms to the 2018 midterms, college student voting doubled. Okay, it went from like 20% to 40%. Young people are voting, right? But people aren't paying attention. So I do think that there is power when people start realizing, what are the issues that we care about. We see so many movements coming together where people are fighting for climate change. We've had like the Sunrise Movement and school walkouts, right? Young people are listening and they are caring. We have young people leading so many of these social justice movement protests around Black Lives Matter and police accountability, right? It is young people. And we've seen that across history, whether it was, lowering the voting age from 21 to 18, because people were fighting in Vietnam, and young people were at the forefront, or the civil rights movement in the 60s. So I think, it's sort of reframing the conversation to be, what are the issues that young people care about? And how do we ensure that there aren't obstacles and barriers to get them to the polls? Because oftentimes these young people, they might have housing instability. They may be going to university in a different location. I know myself personally, right? I registered to vote on my 18th birthday and didn't get to vote until I was 21, because I always missed the absentee deadlines when I was a college student in Georgia, and I lived in Massachusetts before that. And so some of these things I feel like a lot of people and universities are taking up the charge to assist with, but oftentimes it's just not at the forefront of our minds. So I do think that, getting out the youth vote means talking about the issues that young people care about, actually asking them what they think, right? Even if students can't vote, right? Like, let alone lowering the voting age, even asking them, like, what do you care about, right? Like, all of these kinds of conversations get at the fruit at why young people will be motivated. And I know that even as a local candidate, when I asked young people who were like 15, 16, what they cared about in their community, right? Even if they couldn't vote, they were suddenly more interested in politics, right? Because somebody actually asked them. And so I think oftentimes politicians write off the young people, whether they can vote or not, because they don't think they're going to turn out. But it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? So we need to be able to actually get young people to the polls by actually asking them and saying, we care that you vote, right? Civic engagement is important. And so I do think that there's a lot of excitement now. I think there's a lot of attention on voters, a lot of new organizations that have come up to get young people out to vote. And it really is so relational as well. I mean, even when I keep saying the primary, but I texted all my friends, right, who are like millennials like me, and all of them forgot about the vote, like the election today. And I'm like, are you going to the polls? Did you get your vote by mail ballot? You know, and I'm like sending them their sample ballots. I'm like looking up the deadlines that they need and like where their drop box is located. So sometimes you just need that aggressively involved friend to push you along, because oftentimes our networks are who we bring with us when we're voting. Voting is a social activity.
Right. Exactly. Caroline, do you want to, I know we're limited on time, but do you want to tackle this question before we open it up to the chat box?
You know, I would just say this is the time, right? This is who's leading the national protests, and throughout the ongoing pandemic, the economic crisis. I mean, it's been young people that have been leading the way, that have been motivated to push for progress, to create change in their communities. And in order to encourage them to vote, we have to have elected officials and candidates for office that are equally as motivated to represent them and advocate for their needs. And so that is also elevating trailblazing candidates who are truly representative of their communities, who are pushed back against the political status quo and the outdated norms. And it's about the issues, right? Young people care about the issues. Of course, we're going to talk about, you know, childhood and teen education and social justice issues, and make sure that we take care of our seniors. I always tell new candidates, get that plan to do voter registration, but get your senior center schedule ready and bring some young people in there so you can have that intergenerational experience. But we have to speak to the issues of 18 to 35-year-olds, right? That voting block. Climate change, job training, you know, for 21st century skills, right? Getting more women and people of color into tech, for example, truly universal healthcare, whether that's Medicare for all or whatever it is. These are the bread and butter issues that a lot of our young people want to hear more about. And that informs kind of the legislation and the advocacy that I put forward, and the groups that I fund, who want to do, again, a lot of work organizing, but being inclusive about it. So I think, you know, we're facing an especially pivotal election. We need to make sure every ballot is counted. In the June primary election in my state, in my city, thousands of New York voters may have been disenfranchised by no fault of their own. So whether it's encouraging or urging, I should say, the Board of Elections to expand the use of vote by mail to allow voters to exercise their civic right safely from home, or as actually Samantha mentioned, the drop boxes, we're trying to get drop boxes. Like, we don't have them. We can put them in libraries. No, we don't have drop boxes. It's like, can we put them in libraries and safe spaces where there's like people that speak their language, and maybe a cultural center that people feel safe in? That makes a lot of sense to me. Automatic voter registration, like things like that. So I think there's so much at stake in this year in the elections on both the national and the very, very local levels. So with the support and enthusiasm of young people, I think we can really build a powerful movement in the voting booth this year. And what I try to tell young people at the very least is that maybe the Electoral College makes us all crazy, but those other elections, people can lose by 1 vote, 2 votes,
Yes.
10 votes. Like, it really does make the difference in having a candidate that speaks to your issues, whereas someone else who really doesn't want to truly represent the community and do the work.
Yes, exactly. Thank you so much. We have a question that I want to throw it out there for us. Jayanti, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, asks, how do you help family understand why you want to go into politics and activism? And how do you deal with the judgment that you may receive from society as a whole, being a woman or a woman of color and running for office?
You said family, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I know. The
Family.
first time I told I wasn't even sure. Like, I don't think I'd ever envisioned myself running, but when my predecessors asked me to, when I told my family, they were like, politics, really? So, you know, what can I say? Like, there are certain families, people that feel a certain kind of way about voting. My family always took voting very, very seriously. It's like I always tell people that my family would dress up to go 3 places, you know, church, airport, and to vote. Like, that's it. Like, that's, you get dressed up for those things. They're very, very special. It always felt like a privilege to go to each of those places. So yeah, it's you know, especially if you're a mom, if you have a spouse, if you maybe are going to rely on your family financially, you know, running for office, it can be a real financial strain. No job, no health care. I was in that position. So you just have to be really honest about why you want to do it. And that's the first thing I ask candidates when I sit down with them is that, why do you want to run? And so that usually gives me an insight as to why they're doing this. And you know, your family will understand. Now, you know, I go to see my grandpa in Puerto Rico. He pulls out the palm card that he saved every time, you know, so they'll get there. But, you know, you got to understand it's really, really hard when, you know, I was raised to say, you know, take life very, very seriously, get a good job, try to get a pension and take care of your family. And that's okay. You know, we need essential workers. We need people that are keeping our cities and our towns and villages running. And we certainly need to take care of those people and make sure that they have a retirement plan in place. So it's not easy, but just be honest if you really want it.
And frankly, I don't even know if my parents or my family are still a big fan of me being in politics. I mean, I've always just, you know, done my own thing. And then when I told them, they're like, okay. And then the first question my mom would always ask whenever I tell her something is, how are you going to feed yourself with that? You know, it's always like, okay, go get it. Like, just exactly like what Councilwoman Rivera mentioned. I think also because coming from that immigrant background from my parents, like they really struggle to even just had a proper meal, you know, growing up. And so for them, like the very first concern for them is, how are you going to feed yourself? Like, are you going to make money out of this? And so, you know, like it took a lot of convincing, and I'm honestly not sure if they're still a big fan of this idea, but it's, you know, just one step at a time, one day at a time, slowly exposing them to like civic engagement, to public service. I generally try to just stay away from the word politics, instead just be like, it's about public service, it's about, you know, engagement, and that helps. So yeah, not quite there yet, but we're getting there.
It's about serving your community. I'm not a politician. I'm representing my community. Yes, I get it. Thank you all so much. Oh, exactly.
I was gonna say, I'll add briefly. I was gonna say, people always go, oh, you're a politician, and it has this negative word, but we've been socialized to make it negative. It's not, you know, being able to serve your community and being selfless to like take time, right? Like, at least like at the local level too, right? You're not like, not so like you're getting paid a lot, right? You're doing it because you care, right? And I remember like when I told my dad I was going to run, he just kind of was silent. Like, I feel like people didn't know what to make of it. And I think we live in a world where like women being like, actually, I want to be a leader. Like, I want to be in the front, and I want to, you know, stand up and use my voice for good. I think people aren't used to women being at the front. They're used to women being in the background, right? Doing all the work and getting none of the credit. And I think that, it was challenging just to get people to be like, wait a minute, like you can do all of this work. And I think that what's so important is that you believe in yourself, because at the end of the day, like you can have as many volunteers or anything, but your mindset has to be so focused on that election and so consistent on the things that you need to do. And that's how you win an election, because you're just like all in, and your family will come. They'll see that dedication. And of course, like, you know, they love the afterwards. Like my mom loved everything. Like my whole family was so excited and so proud, but sometimes they don't see it, right? Because it's something new for them. So you have to bring them along with you. It's, you know, it's a process, and it's, you know, it's scary for everyone, especially because what happens, you know, you lose or you don't have a job anymore, all those pieces, but you just got to go for it, right? No risk, no reward. You got to go all the way.
Or the way the press analyzes women, very different.
I love it. I love it. Thank you all so much. Thank you. I didn't get to write down everything, but I'm going to watch this recording and then write it all down, because you guys, great advice. You hit everything on the head that I was thinking about, and really helped reframe the imposter syndrome that I'm just even facing with this race. And I really appreciate you guys taking the time out to be on this panel
And Sid,
and have a
actually,
conversation.
do we have one? I do want, because I know you brought up the imposter syndrome a few times, and if it's okay with you, do we have time? I don't want to, if it's okay, I just want to quickly address that real quick. 5 minutes, 2 minutes. Okay, well, I'll just do it anyway.
1 minute.
Okay, 1 minute. So that's something that I was really struggling with, but I thought I overcame it. And then being a mom, it actually brought back some of that guilt feeling too. Like for instance, like when I was out on maternity leave, I was constantly worrying. I was like, oh my gosh, like I feel like I'm not doing enough. I feel like I'm not doing enough. And then when I became a mom, I'm just like, am I like, do I qualify for this? Do I qualify to be in this committee, right? But I very quickly, I shifted my thinking and I was like, wait, I do qualify. And the most important thing is that we need to normalize taking maternity leave. We need to normalize bringing kids to event. We need to normalize a working mom schedule. And the reality is that unless I start showing people that, nobody is ever going to take me seriously. Nobody is ever going to take moms in office seriously. And so for me, I'm still struggling with that. I'm trying to move away from that imposter syndrome, but I have to constantly remind myself that no, this is normal. Being a mom in office is normal. Having to take a break to pump is normal. Having to bring a kid is normal. All those are normal. And so so a lot of times I'm not sure exactly, what you're experiencing or what your thoughts are, but a lot of times it's shifting that traditional thinking and trying something new, breaking that barriers, breaking that tradition. And we're bringing a new normalcy to this. So.
And someone in the chat box, Carolyn, asked about being dismissed as the young woman in the realm of politics for not having enough experience. And no matter like how old you are, like think about your life. Like I grew up in subsidized housing on supplemental food program, thinking about getting vouchers to apply for college because I couldn't afford
Carolina, I'm so sorry, but we are over time. We are over. I'm so sorry.
It's just letting people know have the experience.
Yes. But thank you all so much. This has been an amazing panel, and I'm in awe of all three of you. And I want to kick it now to Ann Moses, who's our president and founder of Ignite, so she can take it over. But thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Stay in touch, ladies.
I'm trying. Can I make my camera go?
You should be able to do so now.
Let's see. I'm going to keep talking. How do I do that? I'm going to talk while someone figures out how to do that. Does someone have oh, there it is at the bottom. There I am. Hi, everyone. Backlit. You can probably see my dog behind me. First of all, I just want to say, you guys this is exactly why I started Ignite. You are the reason I started Ignite 10 years ago, in the hopes that I would see this, which is passionate and bold and incredible women representing their communities who are not afraid to do it, younger than is typical, who are embracing, as Carlina says, their experience, your experience, the experience that you have just having lived your life, and your perspectives and your experiences, even as a child, they all inform your ability to lead and to run and to be a great politician and policymaker. And so, I mean, I feel like this conversation could have gone on for like another 3 hours. But I just want to say, like, these moments really inspire me, because this really is the reason I started Ignite. So today, Ignite is training close to 10,000 young women in 36 states across the country. And I've really never felt more urgency to keep the momentum going. First and foremost, Sydney referenced this, but obviously we have to mobilize the powerful Gen Z vote. I think Sam talked about the fact that people expect young women not to vote, and then it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. Sam, you were like singing my song. I say that all the time. So to that end, Ignite has started a campaign called Ignite the Vote, which aims to basically popularize voting for first-time voters by getting in front of at least 5 million young people, and especially young women, in the next couple months. We're already more than, almost 25% there. And then we're also registering and mobilizing 100,000 new voters. And we have a bunch of different ways that we're doing that. But I think someone put in the chat, the best way to check it out is we've created a chat bot called Sophia that actually walks you through voting. And young people in particular have crazy, crazy barriers this year because of COVID, and they don't know where they're living and how can I get an absentee ballot. So if you're interested in checking it out, text Ignite to 33777 or just go to our webpage, the homepage on our website, and you'll see it on the homepage. The other thing we're doing is that the civil rights protests, I think Carlina and all three of you made reference to this, but they've really changed the math for young women across the country. And we have heard from young women that they really want to accelerate their path to political leadership right now. I think there is this sense that perhaps earlier generations have been failing this country, and it's really time for new leadership on a lot of different levels. So we're super excited about this, since, as you can see from this conversation, there really is no reason for young women to wait. And so to that end, we're doing two things this fall. One is a series called Run Now, which is a 10-week virtual training program for young women across the country. And you can find that on our website as well. And then Power to the People, which is a 7-session series that is training young women to get appointed to police oversight commissions across the US. And we're also doing a legislative advocacy piece around that Jocelyn is in fact running as well, to try and get police oversight commissions in communities where there aren't any. So I want to thank you all for coming. And if you haven't already made a gift to Ignite this year, I'm hoping you will consider making one today. Think of it as an investment in women like Carlina and Jocelyn and Sam, and tens of thousands of women like them across the country. Your support will go a long way in making sure that we don't let off the gas, and that we make sure that we find and train and get women like them elected. So thank you so much for coming. And I really appreciate everyone tuning into this conversation, and our panelists and Sydney for facilitating it.
Thanks. Good night, everyone.
Bye.